Welcome to Light the Path, the podcast that brings you inspiring stories of courage, strength, and faith. Listen in as we explore how God's love and grace can inspire and motivate us to overcome life's challenges and light the path forward.
Hello, Pathfinders. How are y'all? How is everything going? What you doing? Welcome back to Light the Path podcast. I am so glad you're here today. And of course, we got another awesome podcast to share with you. And you're going to like this, but I do have to give a disclaimer. This podcast will have sensitive content involving domestic violence, abuse, emotional abuse. So if you have triggers, just be warned that we will be diving deeper into some conversations about that, because I have the pleasure of having domestic violence survivor Gladys Stocks here with us today to talk about her book, Never Would Have Made It. Isn't this a gorgeous cover? Ooh, it's a gorgeous cover. And this book, we're going to talk about it, but you see that she has a pen name. So y'all help me welcome Gladys to Light the Path podcast. Hello.
Hello. How are you today?
I am well. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today. And we got to talk about it. We're going to dive deep into it. But first of all, thank you so much for writing this. Thank you for bringing this to the forefront. I think we need to, as a society, bring more awareness to domestic violence and emotional abuse, because a lot of times, and especially in your book, it's subtle things at first. It's small little pebbles that we overlook and all that. And so we're going to get into it. But let's talk about this first. Your name is Gladys Stocks, but on here is J.M. Sims.
Yes.
What made you write under a pen name for your first publication?
So I decided to write under a pen name because I didn't want people to immediately know it was me. The world is so judgmental, and I have dealt with so much judgment from people I know, from people I don't know. And I wanted to have a little bit of anonymity. And then once you purchase the book and you flip it over, if you look on the back, you see my picture and it's like, oh, wait a minute, I know her, And so that it allowed me to share my story without feeling the pressures of, oh my gosh, am I being too personal? Am I sharing too much?
Well, I thought that was brilliant. Because of the content that is in here. And first of all, I didn't read the whole book. I had to stop, and y'all gonna hear why. But let me read the chapters to you. Now, this is a rich book. It's only 7 chapters, right? So chapter 1, it talks about a troubled upbringing. Chapter 2, growing pains. Chapter 3, a mother's worst nightmare. Chapter 4, the big move. Chapter 5, starting over. Chapter 6, the healing process. And chapter 7, the epilogue. So I read up until chapter 5, started over. And obviously, we're here, right? You're here. You've navigated through a mother's worst nightmare. And
Yes.
The subtitle to the book, Never Would Have Made It, How Overcoming Grief and Loss Saved My Life. So you are a domestic violence survivor, and you talk
Yes.
a good bit about it in the beginning, just starting off with your grandfather. And so let's talk a little bit about that as far as your upbringing and how did it bring you to this point to even want to write this book?
So unfortunately, I grew up watching a lot of abuse. It started in the home with my grandmother, my grandfather. My grandfather, God rest his soul, he was abusive to my grandmother. And watching my grandmother go through the things that she went through, it really shaped my idealisms of how a relationship should look between a man and a woman. And then I would go visit my aunt and my uncle. And my uncle, God rest his soul, he liked to drink. And when he drank, that resulted in him being verbally abusive to my aunt. I can't say that I've ever physically seen him abuse her, but I do know that it occurred. But I witnessed a lot of verbal abuse. And so, these examples, these immediate examples of how a relationship should look, set the tone for, okay, so when I get older, I feel like this should be acceptable or that should be acceptable and things of that nature, not realizing that those things were really abuse. Those things were wrong. They should not have had to endure the things that they had to endure.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, where were your parents at? Because it seems like in the book, because I know, and I love that you put this in here. Let me read this little part because I do want y'all to get the book, so I'm not going to share everything. I'm only sharing pieces because I want you to read this book. Uh, it was like the disclaimer. Hold on, let me find it. I thought I had it pinned, but it says that it is this book is 16 years in the making. It is based on a true story, but most of the names have been changed to protect the innocent. And it is my hope that whoever reads it will see themselves in at least one of the characters and be able to relate. Some of the content contained in this book may trigger emotions in people who have been victims of sexual assault and childhood traumas. I thought that was very good that you put that in there because you are bringing your story out. However, you're not trying to drag, quote unquote, anyone. Where were your parents at in this book? Because you were with your grandparents, or did you just switch that up for the book's sake?
No, no. So I was raised by my grandparents. When I was born, my mom had a lot of stuff going on. She had two other children. She had some things going on. And my dad stepped in to take me. Unfortunately, my dad was a truck driver. And so a lot of times he drove out of state. He was gone for weeks at a time. And so I ended up living with his parents.
Okay, gotcha. And this is what I love about local artists, local authors, because we can get the inside scoop. Sometimes we may not be able to talk to, I don't know, Sarah Jakes Roberts, right? And
Right.
a lot of our stories mirror each other when we bring it out. So that you're bringing this out, somebody is going to be able to relate to your situation, because I think the enemy tries to isolate us. Like, you're the only one going through this. Like, don't tell
Right.
nobody, don't say nothing.
Right. Right.
Once you bring it out there, it's like, wait a minute. I know somebody, or I've been through that. And so it's very beautiful that you brought this out. It's very the even the first chapter was hard to read, Gladys, if I'm being honest, about the upbringing, about bullying in school, and going through sexual abuse by somebody that was in the family. So, how were you able to bring those memories up and then put pen to paper? Was it therapeutic for you?
It was very, very therapeutic. I have struggled with overcoming my past and really like figuring out, why these things happen. I grew up in the church. Both my grandmother was very religious and my aunt was very religious. I was in church sometimes 7 days a week, and so I know that God allows things to happen and that everything happens for a reason. I could not understand why these things would happen to me. And, I, of course, it was that, oh my gosh, I'm the only person going through this, no one else deals with this type of stuff, and as I got older, and I've had conversations with other women, I found out like, no, hold up, pause. This happens. It happens more often than it happens to the woman sitting next to you that may not have the courage to talk about it or share her story. And so for me, it was like, okay, how can I take this pain, this trauma, this anxiety, this depression, all of these things that I have been dealing with for years and turn it into something else? And so I had joined a group on Facebook, and it was like a group of women authors. And I was like, okay, as I started interacting and stuff, and I was like, well, let me share, some of what I've written. So I would put a few pages in the group chat, like, hey, this is what I have going on. There was one young lady that we would talk outside of the group chat. Like, I would send her messages and I'm like, okay, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm thinking of. What do you think? And, she was like, well, it's very heavy, she was like, I've had a miscarriage, and I can tell you that I wouldn't want to read a book about somebody losing a child. And I was like, but why? Why are we so afraid as a people to confront and address these issues that happen? They happen. Like the statistics on women who have lost children in a relationship, it's alarming. Like there are a lot of children that have been their lives have been taken by people that are their parents, their grandparents that are not even related to them. Like all of these things, it happens more often than we know. And we're afraid to talk about it. It's just like mental health, especially in the Black community. We're afraid to talk about these things. But why? And I know it's because it's a trigger, but if you don't address it, you will never overcome it.
Yeah, that's true. And that you're bringing up in this cuz you sort of alluded to it about losing your son. We don't talk about it because we're afraid that if we talk about it, it's going to present itself into our lives. If we talk
Right.
about, losing a child, or if we talk about mental health, uh, it's fear. It's fear that's crippling us. And also once you realize something like this is going on, you have to do something. So then it's the responsibility what also brings up to our mind. And so it's like, okay, fear got us right here. I don't know what to do. And then when you do know this is going on, it's like, okay, so what do I do? How can I help this situation? And so when I was reading your book, going through it and hearing the different relationships you had with men, and then ultimately having someone in your life that contributed to your son's death, how are you here right now talking to us? Because for me, the title alone, Never Would Have Made It, is huge. And we all know the song, and we have to say that this idea came out before the song.
Yep.
But how are you here today, Gladys, talking about this? Because that's why I didn't finish the book. After that, and I read what happened. I mean, you can talk about it if you want to, but I just stopped. I'm like, okay, I need a pause.
God, I can only contribute the fact that I'm sitting here today to God, and having people that genuinely cared about me pray for me. My aunt, like, never stopped praying for me. I went to therapy, talking to a grief counselor. Like when I first lost my son, and I went and I talked to a grief counselor, and the first thing she said to me was, "You're stronger than anything I can imagine." She was like, "My daughter's 18." She was like, "If something happened to my child, I would lose my mind." And I was like, I did. I lost my mind. Like I went through all of those emotions, but I also knew that I still had other children that needed me. And so I just talked to God constantly. I prayed to God. Like at first, when it happened, I didn't want to talk to God. I couldn't understand how God could allow something like this to happen. But then I dug back into my roots and I remember that everything happens for a reason. And because of the strength that I know I have, I know that it happened to me because he knew I could handle it. Not in the beginning, you know what I mean? Not in the beginning, not for many, many years could I handle it. I beat myself up so much. I blamed myself so much for what happened, even though it wasn't my fault. Even though I couldn't control this person, their thoughts, their actions, anything of that nature, I still blame myself because I was in a relationship. I chose this person. That's how I saw it. I chose this person. I chose to bring this person into my life, into the lives of my children. And so, therefore, it was my fault. And it wasn't until I sat down, and I had been sitting down and talking to God and talking to God. And one day, God said to me, "It wasn't you." And that was it was what I needed to propel me to, okay, now what else can I do with this situation? How can I take this traumatic experience and turn it around into something else?
Yeah, so let's talk about starting over. So you get to this point, you're starting over. Do you even want to date? Do you even want to bring anyone else around your kids? How do you get from this situation to the next point where you are starting over? How did you do
I
it?
I just prayer, a lot of prayer. I didn't want to do it. I still have trust issues. Like I still have trust issues. Even now, I am very cautious about who I have around my current son, who's 14. He'll be 15 this year. I'm cautious about who I have around him, who he interacts with. I have conversations with him. Like I talk to him. Like if you're ever in a position where you feel uncomfortable if someone says or does something, and I'm not around and it makes you feel uncomfortable, call me, text me. I don't care. I want to know immediately. Because no matter how I feel about that person, if you're not comfortable, if my child isn't comfortable, you got to go. Like that's it. Like
Yes,
that's it. That's all.
that part. So then so we're starting over. But God, right? He did it. You never would have made it. Overcoming grief and the loss, it saved your life. Tell us about life now. Right
Life now,
writing this book
life
after.
now is it's amazing. You know, so many things. I I've had people in my ear over the last year as I've been on this journey, right? And as I'm saying, sharing my ideas and putting out there what I want to do. And people are, oh, I think you should do it this way. Oh, I think you should do it that way. And I'm like, nah, I'm not listening to man anymore. I'm only listening to the man upstairs. And as I've done that, doors have opened for me that I would not have imagined. I've had opportunities that I would not have imagined. I was just in South Carolina almost 2 weeks ago at a book lovers expo, sharing my passion, sharing my love for writing, and just being able to take that pain, and turn it into a passion with others. I would not have imagined these opportunities, being on your podcast, being able to talk to you. You know what I mean? I did not see these things, but I listened and I was obedient. And when God said, write this book, I wrote this book. I struggled to write this book. I was being told to write this book for 16 years. And I had to get to a place of healing in myself where I could say, okay, I'm going to sit down and write this book. The book is short, and people say, oh, I wish you would have made it longer. Whoo, you don't know what it took to write this. You understand what I'm saying? It took 16 years to write this.
Yes, yes. I mean, it's short, but it's very powerful. It is very powerful. Again, let me look at the pages. 68 pages, and I stopped at page 51, okay? Because I had to regroup, get myself. I mean, it was a lot to digest. But I applaud you for doing it and for sticking to it and doing with the pen name. So that way it's out there, you're obedient to God, but then you can also sit back and say, okay, I'm not gonna take any hits for that, because I mean, even with this, and I know with our life stories, there are some stories we'll never tell, right? And then there are stories that we are sharing, like these, that are going to help other people. But your life story is still being written, and that's the beautiful thing. I love what you have going on right now. So what other projects do you have going on after your first publication?
So I actually decided to it again. I've been really listening to God. So when I was writing the book and everything last year, and I was going through everything, something kept coming to me like, okay, you got to do something with Jabari's name. His initials are JLS, Jabari Lanier Stocks. And so I was like, I have to do something with JLS. So at first I was going to do a candle line. I was going to call it JLS. That was going to be it. And then when I would go through moments where I would feel kind of discouraged, or I would feel like, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. Just love self kept coming to me. And I was like, just love self. It's so grammatically incorrect. You know what I mean? I was like, people are going to be like, what? Just love self? But it made sense, you know, because when you think about life and you think about challenges, it's about just loving yourself enough to say, you know what, I got this. I can do this. I'm stronger than this. You know what I mean? And so I was like, okay, that's it. That's the name. That's it. And so then I was like, okay, I got to work on the logo. And I really wanted it to be a brand that was geared towards women, you know, just encouraging women of any age to just love self. Like no matter what challenges you face, no matter how society says, you know, you should be this, you should be that. Like I have been struggling with my weight loss, and I realized that a lot of my struggle with my weight loss is because society tells me I should look a certain way. I'm not the healthiest person, but I'm not the unhealthiest person either. You know, so I realized that instead of putting that pressure on myself, you got to lose weight today, you got to lose the weight today, I'm gradually working on making the changes necessary, because it's all about the little changes that you make. You can have a goal, but how are you going to get to that goal?
Absolutely. I love that. Let everybody know where they can connect with you on social media to get all this goodness. You're going to want to connect with her on social media because all her posts are inspirational. They're good. You can see what she has going on, what she's doing. She keeps everybody informed. So tell everybody where they can find you at on social media.
So on Instagram is Just Love Self LLC. On TikTok is Just Love Self. And on Facebook, you can follow Just Love Self LLC. And also, I just released a new workbook. It is a self-love challenge. So it's
Mm,
30 days to a better you, the
okay.
self-love challenge. That is available on Amazon.com, Walmart.com, BarnesandNoble.com, Target.com, and you can also purchase it on my website, just underscore, no, excuse me, if you go to my Instagram, you'll see it's long. I'm working on redoing my website because
That's okay, but that's
I have a
beautiful.
I have a square website, and so because I didn't purchase the domain, it's like just slash love slash self slash LLC. I'm just like it's a lot, but if you go to my Instagram. My link tree will take you to everything. It will literally take you to a direct link where you can purchase the workbook. I'm also on September 1st starting a self love challenge. So I believe that self love is something, anything that's related to self love, you can do that over and over and over again. You can never love yourself too much. So even though I did the challenge as I was completing the workbook, I've decided that I want to restart it for the fall, like a fall reset. And so I'm looking for 10 ladies. I have 3 so far. So I'm looking for 10 ladies to join me. And we're going to go through this self love challenge together.
That is beautiful. That is so beautiful. Y'all make sure y'all connect with her. And I know all having it at all the places, but get it from her first. So go to her Instagram, hit the link tree, and purchase the book, the workbook from her. And oh, I'm looking forward to hearing more about the challenge coming up. Remember, everyone, that sharing your experiences is not only empowering, it can help light the path.